Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Have you ever imagined yourself as the hero of a romantic series in which life was going to turn out just fine? There was a loved one around, and work was only a pleasure. Adriana always dreamed that her life was exactly like in her favorite TV series, which she always watched as a child. And it seemed to her that everything was exactly like that. A favorite husband, a wonderful job, a faithful and loyal friend, with whom she was acquainted since childhood. But who would have thought that a romantic melodrama about her life could turn out to be a thriller? Adriana has successfully graduated in journalism from one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Since childhood, she dreamed of working in this field, and as the years went by, her eagerness and desire became more and more pronounced. By the age of 18, she firmly told her parents that she would study at Moscow University, and despite numerous excuses, she still entered it. Even a very young girl decided to completely abandon the help of her parents and start earning on her own, no matter how difficult it was. At first, it was quite difficult to find a job that could be successfully combined with studies. We had to go through small part-time jobs and not the most lucrative offers, which offered a free schedule and provided the opportunity to get time off as needed. Soon, Adriana came to the conclusion that in this way, she will definitely not be able to live in the capital without the help of parents. And so it was decided to look for a permanent job with a more or less stable income. The girl categorically refused any simple money, despite the fact that some men offered very attractive sums per evening. By the way, Adriana was quite beautiful and charismatic, and therefore without attention from the side she did not remain. She was quite slender and active, easily found a common language with new people, and could generally without problems to fit into a new team. And it was these features of character helped her to soon get a job as a hostess in a very decent institution. Salary promised to be very decent, such that you could rent an apartment and provide yourself with everything you need in the capital. Times after moving from her hometown were quite difficult, but fortunately, Adriana experienced them much easier than it could be. Betty, who had been her best friend since high school, was always by her side. Betty was in the same class as Adriana. She also graduated from high school and decided to apply to Moscow universities, although she had originally planned not to move far away from home. In many ways, she did it only for the sake of her best friend, with whom they were literally like inseparable. Until the last moment, Betty still refused to go to the capital, but one conversation that took place almost before she left changed everything. Betty and her parents always had dinner together. It was a nice family tradition that allowed them to stay close-knit and close-knit, regardless of the work and study load of various external circumstances, which so often become the cause of discord in families, and both between spouses and between parents and children. And so during the next such dinner, there was a very unexpected conversation for Betty, which she did not expect in any way. "Gold, when are you going to get a ticket to Moscow? Or your girlfriend hasn't decided yet. When will you go?" Mom asked the girl, to which she received a mute question in her eyes. "But you're going with her, aren't you? My dad and I thought that you will go to a university in the capital together and live together, to make it easier at the beginning of your independent adult life." The woman smiled, making it clear that she meant it. By the way, it should be noted that the girl's father was not so long ago categorically opposed to her going far away and leaving them completely alone. Betty once tried to start a conversation about enrollment in Moscow, but it almost turned into a grandiose scandal as the father insisted exclusively on enrollment in the local university, where it was possible to get a profession in different directions. After this conversation, the girl never brought up the topic again, fearing a negative reaction. And then suddenly her mother independently asks when it is better to purchase a ticket, and the father just silently continues, "There is," pretending that nothing is happening. "But you didn't want me to enter a Moscow educational institution." "I'm not sure," muttered Betty, especially watching her father's reaction carefully. You wanted me to study nearby and come home every weekend so you could see me often. And if I go to Moscow, that won't happen. I'll only be able to visit on vacation, and that's if I can make it. Are you sure you want to let me go so far away from home?" There was an awkward silence at the table. It was obvious that the man was not very happy with the topic of conversation and was definitely tense, but he didn't say anything to the contrary. And after a couple of minutes, Betty's mom confidently replied, "Of course you can go to any university you want. The main thing is that it should be your decision and not an imposed option for which you will lose a few years of your life. Remember that everything you do should bring you pleasure. People around you should be sincere and honest, and then your life will turn out in the best possible way." This simple truth, which Betty heard from her mother, she will remember for the rest of her life. But as it turns out, it is not easy to understand what kind of person is next to you, what his intentions are, and how he will affect your life. Being overly trusting and believing that everyone is worthy of a second chance and forgiveness can play a cruel trick. Both Betty and Adriana will see this for themselves. But for now, the girls study, work, and rent a very cozy apartment together, though not in the central part of the city, but close enough to their studies and work. They spent almost all their time together, made new acquaintances, went on steamy dates, and even planned steamy weddings in the future. But not always the fate turns out exactly as we want, and some moments still remain only in dreams. So right after graduation, Adriana almost immediately married Sebastian, whom she met at work. The man showed her quite a lot of attention, always groomed and tied with gifts. And this could not help but win the hearts of the girl. He was very gentle, always helped in a difficult minute. The couple met for a couple of years while Adriana was studying at the university. But then on some family matters, Sebastian had to leave for more than a year, to leave the capital and cut all ties. In the future, the man did not comment on this behavior and did not explain the fact that for a year he did not contact anyone. This page of his life remained in the past, and now he was trying to create a happy family. Sebastian was quite handsome himself. He did sports, ate right, spent a lot of time closet, and made very attractive images, which did not go unnoticed by the fair sex. The attention to his person was quite a lot, but he ignored everyone, giving all his attention only to Adriana, who was very flattered by this situation. She felt beautiful and desirable. After returning and solving all his personal affairs, Sebastian almost immediately proposed to Adriana. Knowing that she had already graduated from university and was in search of an attractive job, he promised to make the wedding exactly as the girl wanted. He promised to help her find a job and offered to give up this prospect altogether and take care of herself with household chores, and he would provide for her completely. It would not be difficult for him to do this because he managed a chain of restaurants and also had his own small business in the legal field, which was developing very successfully. But Adriana still insisted on working full-time and earning independently. After the beginning of the relationship with Sebastian, Adriana felt some distance and deterioration of relations with Betty, which often became the cause of bad moods and misunderstandings. Why can't her favorite man and her best friend get along? One day, the girl decided to have a serious talk with Betty to finally understand everything. But the conversation never led to any result. "But why can't you just accept the fact that I have a man who loves me and whom I love?" Adriana said in a hurt and even a little annoyed voice. "You must understand that I am trying to build my happiness, and all our plans about getting married together and everything else are just dreams that may or may not come true. I don't want to distance myself from myself. I don't want to lose such a close and dear person who supported me for so many years in all my endeavors. But I can't force you to continue communication." The girl lowered her head. It was obvious that it was extremely hard for her to realize the fact that the relationship between her and her best friend had deteriorated. "What does this have to do with getting married together and all our childhood dreams?" Betty asked. "That's not the problem. I realize that you're an adult, an independent person, and you have every right to a happy future with the person you love and who loves you. I just can't trust this Sebastian guy. Every time I see him, I get this strange feeling of anxiety and danger. I can't even explain it. I feel like this man is hiding something from everyone, and that he's not who he wants to be. I just don't want you to get in trouble or get involved with the wrong person. Do you understand? Betty looked at her friend, who had been listening attentively all this time, but as if she didn't understand anything, she said, "Jesus, what danger? Do you hear yourself?" Adriana asked rudely. "I love this man. He makes me happy and I'm safe with him. He always helps me with all my problems, protects me from annoying left-handed men, and never leaves me alone in a difficult situation. He's exactly what I need to live a happy life, and you just can't accept that I have another close person who is as dear to me as you are." The girl watched her entourage's reaction to the words she said carefully to see if it was true. Betty was silent for a few seconds, and then she answered, "You may be right. And I have some resentment that you have a new person in your life who is as important to you as I am, and with whom you spend a lot of time. But I'm sure the problem isn't just my feelings, but Sebastian himself, who seems too perfect. Did it seem to you that he's trying to be something he's not really? That he just seems like that perfect man from the TV series we watched all the time as kids, and then spent weeks discussing how we wanted to live that same life? Is there such a thing in life? I think there's something definitely not right here." "Yes, God," Adriana replied with some indignation, and in a raised tone of voice. "Why can't you just be happy for me? Why can't I just accept the fact that I have such a perfect man who spends a lot of time with me, willing to do anything to make me happy? Even to his own detriment, he refuses to go to a bar with his friends to spend time with me. He understands perfectly well that I need to spend time with my best friend too. I can't do it without her. If you had a boyfriend like that, I would be genuinely happy for your happiness and support your choice regardless of my feelings and stupid thoughts. So why can't you just be happy for me?" The last phrase was especially emotional, and tears glistened in Adriana's eyes. Even though Betty's opinion about her friend's chosen man hadn't changed, and she was still sure that the man was definitely hiding something, she simply hugged Adriana and said, "You what? I'm very happy for you. I think you're going to be a wonderful family, and everything is going to be fine. And that you'll have the wedding you wanted, and that everything in the future will work out like in your favorite show. It's just hard for me to get over the fact that you've become so far away from me, and that we don't live together anymore and don't talk much. So I'm worried that one day you'll just forget about me with your personal happiness, and that's it. I'll be left alone and forgotten." "You mean that will never happen?" Adriana replied confidently to her friend, even though Betty didn't think so. And the main reason she disliked Sebastian was precisely because of the strange feeling of unease and danger. She made the decision to say exactly what her friend wanted to hear, to get rid of the heated situation and get their relationship back to normal. But she wasn't going to just back down. She wanted to find out exactly what was wrong with the man. Why couldn't she just accept him as perfect? And what could be lurking in his past that he never talked about? The main thing was to do everything in such a way that it did not become the reason for the deterioration of the relationship with Adriana and did not lead to unnecessary hype. The wedding was to take place in a few months. Adriana was sure that it would be the happiest day of her life, that she had made the right choice, and would live a long and happy life with the man she loved. But unfortunately, fate did not prepare happy endings for everyone. And at one moment life can turn 180 degrees. Who knows how tomorrow will turn out? But always want to believe in the best, and that's what the girl did. She could not even imagine that she would be in the very epicenter of frightening and terrible events in the near future. Preparations for the wedding were in full swing. Adriana paid attention to every little detail. She wanted everything to be perfect, so that there were no flaws and problems in the wedding ceremony. That's why she followed everything herself. She controlled the design of the hall, looked through hundreds of menu options, constantly monitored the readiness of various props and clarified the well-being of the toastmaster and photographer. In general, there was a huge number of things to do. And during the whole time of preparation, the girl was incredibly happy, but she was also very tired. Sebastian paid for all the whims of his bride. He did not refuse her anything, neither in fresh flowers, nor in expensive textiles, nor in rings with precious stones. The girl did not particularly care about money. She was not an economist and did everything exactly as she wanted. Occasionally discussing these or those moments with her fiancé, she even wanted to organize a buyout, as is customary to do at weddings. But Sebastian did not support this desire. "Honey, what's a ransom? We live in a modern society, and this tradition has long outlived itself," the man replied to the proposal to organize such an honor in the wedding celebration. "I don't think we should go to the middle of nowhere. Just to hold a couple of contests and pay money to your parents for you. And the guests probably won't be up for that kind of adventure. Let's just have a divine wedding in the best restaurant in Moscow, which will already make a lasting impression on everyone. If you want, we can even get married in Moscow. I'll make all the arrangements, but let's not have these strange traditions of our ancestors." All right, a little upset, Adriana said. Adriana really wanted to organize everything according to the rules and traditions, but at the same time she understood that her parents really lived far away from the capital. Therefore, it would be quite a problem to organize this part of the wedding celebration. It was decided to do everything exactly as it was originally planned, without buying and matchmaking, so as not to waste time and energy on it. Sebastian was completely satisfied with this option, and in all other moments he fully supported the bride. Throughout the preparations for the wedding ceremony, Betty tried to understand what exactly she did not like about Sebastian. She tried to find some information about the guy, but it turned out that he just appeared out of nowhere. After all, to find information about where he lived and what he was doing before he came to Moscow was simply unrealistic. Of course, the search for information took place as secretly as possible. Betty made the maximum amount of effort so that her friend and Sebastian did not suspect anything. She helped in the process of preparing for the wedding, was happy for Adriana, and was always there for her, but still went about her business. In fact, Betty was saying one thing to her friend's face and doing something else behind her back. This situation upset her a lot. After all, she couldn't share anything with her closest and dearest person. After all, it would almost certainly cause misunderstanding and judgment. Betty believed that she was doing a good deed, that she was trying to bring the man out into the open. But was that really the case? Or did the girl really just couldn't accept that her best friend was getting married, that she was able to find her happiness, while Betty was still single and wasn't even in a relationship? What is it worrying about a loved one? Or just jealousy and a desire to destroy someone else's union that just isn't to the girl's liking? Searching for information about Sebastian often enough led to a dead end. It was unclear where to look for information that could somehow help in the investigation. There was no information about his life on his social media pages. There was no indication of the school and educational institution where he received his education until he moved to the capital. There was no information about his family and hometown. But at the same time, from the moment of moving to Moscow, the guy's life was as if on display. Photos and records from that moment are a huge number, and by them you can understand what he constantly does, where he goes, with whom he communicates, and so on. There were a lot of Moscow acquaintances, but there was no point in communicating with them in order to get any information. After all, they had all appeared after the man had moved. Several weeks of long searches of information did not bring any results. Simple photos then from the city, then from vacation, with a huge number of people, and so on. At that moment, when the girl was almost desperate, she found Sebastian's mark on some guy's page in a photo. Going over the mark, she saw that this person was not in the man's friends, but they were clearly standing together in the photo. The shot is quite old. You can see that it is more than 1 year old. 3 guys are standing on the doorstep of the school, And among them is Sebastian, who looks so carefree and happy. You can see from their clothes that all three boys live poorly. In places you can see scuffed stains from constant meetings. Betty could not even think of the fact that the man was from a poor family. She was sure that his parents were quite rich and well-off people, and that was why he was able to achieve such heights in life, was able to open a business and become the manager of a chain of restaurants. She put a like on the post so that she wouldn't lose it and try to find information about the school the man attended. She also saved directly the account of the man who posted the photo, just in case, just to be sure not to lose the lead. And now it was necessary to quickly pack and go to the bridal salon, where Adriana was about to start trying on wedding outfits to choose a dress. It took a huge amount of time, and the girls returned home, completely vital, but extremely satisfied with the day they had spent. The dress she chose was just incredibly lush and radiant, just the way Adriana wanted it. Betty decided to leave the search for information about her friend's fiancé for the next day. After all, she didn't even have the energy to eat. But Adriana had a very interesting conversation that made her think about her friend's sincerity towards her. After dinner, already at the moment when the couple was lying in bed, Sebastian suddenly asked his fiancée in all seriousness, "Do you think I can, whether your friend likes me or not?" Adriana was even somewhat taken aback by such a question. She looked carefully at her future husband to see if he was serious, but not seeing a bit of mockery in his gaze, she said in a somewhat annoyed and even hurt voice, "Do you think she's capable of that? She's my best friend." Adriana was clearly outraged by such a question and didn't understand how her future husband could ask her such a question just a few days before the wedding. She looked at the man perplexed, but he was completely calm. A few minutes of silence, and the girl indignantly added, "And what is it? You're already looking at my replacement. I understand everything, but you can ignore my best friend, and she will never do that to me. And it's completely unethical of you to ask questions like that, especially right before our wedding. You could at least do it in a way that I don't know about your search and election. Otherwise, this is completely abnormal behavior, and..." The girl didn't have time to finish and voice all her outrage, when Sebastian, in a louder and more irritated voice, said, "Yes, no, what kind of nonsense are you saying? I'm not looking for a replacement for you. I was just curious because she's showing some kind of morbid interest in me. She liked my picture today." Adriana looked at the guy with a puzzled, searching look. "You've decided that she likes you just because she liked you. With such judgments, you'd think that you're liked by hundreds of girls. You have an immeasurable number of likes on every photo. Or you might think that out of all those girls you are secretly loved by the person I care about the most, who is putting so much effort into helping us prepare for the wedding ceremony. No, that's not it. She's picture isn't even on my page or one of my friends' pages. It's on the profile of a man who just posted a picture of me from high school time without consulting me at all. He is not in my friends. I have never posted a picture with this man or tagged him in any pictures. I think she is trying to find information on me or just following me. And it's pretty weird, don't you think?" the man asked, in a very serious tone. "Just because I don't want to talk about my past doesn't mean I have any secrets or mysteries. It's just that I think I have a new life now, and to go back to the old one every time is to keep myself from moving forward. Maybe I should talk to her." Adriana thought about those words. She remembered her friend always saying that she was not satisfied with Sebastian, that he was hiding something and seemed like a dangerous man. But it seemed to her that all of that was in the past, and Betty was genuinely happy for her. It turns out that there really wasn't any joy at all. And all these stories and congratulations are just a beautiful picture, behind which remain the same suspicions and distrust. I don't think there's anything strange about it," the girl said in a calm voice, trying not to show her anxiety and displeasure. "Maybe she just saw your picture in her feed, or this guy wrote to her and offered to communicate, and she saw your picture. That's it. There's not many coincidences that happen every day. I don't think you should take it all that seriously." The girl shrugged, as if showing confidence in her words, and that it could all be a mere coincidence. But if you want, I can talk to her about not liking your pictures, since you're so worried about it. Adriana smiled at the man. Okay, you're right, Sebastian. It could be a mere coincidence. You shouldn't look for hidden meanings everywhere. The girl was fine with that response from her fiancé. But the situation with her friend still did not give her peace. She firmly decided to understand the situation and talk to Betty to understand her intentions. She didn't like the fact that her best friend couldn't trust her, couldn't let go of all the insecurity and doubts she had and just enjoy life and continue to build her own happiness. With all this, she does everything behind her back, trying to find something that will negatively affect the couple's relationship. Betty, on the other hand, was confident that she was doing a good thing. And in the event that Sebastian really has nothing to hide, and all he is ashamed of is the poverty of his family, then she will just apologize to him and his girlfriend, and then everything will be fine. So she opened her laptop right after waking up the next morning and wanted to look at the picture again, to see what kind of school it was, what city it was in, or to find any other information. But the photo was gone. In the network, the record was simply deleted, and in its place, nothing else was posted. And then the girl immediately realized that Sebastian deliberately hides all the information about his past, and he was directly related to the deletion of the photo. Fortunately, Betty had bookmarked the person who had posted the picture, so she could try to get some information through him. A few minutes of hesitation, and now the girl typed the first message. Hi, I'm organizing the wedding ceremony of Sebastian and his girlfriend. I'd like to ask you a couple questions to use in contests and a wedding quiz. Could use a couple minutes of your time. It didn't take long to get an answer. Literally, after a few minutes in the dialogue, there was a reply message from the guy. Hi, I don't think it's appropriate to ask these questions to me specifically. It's better to discuss all this with your fiancé. Betty didn't expect such a response, and it didn't suit her at all. She knew that Sebastian would not voluntarily say anything about his past, and she needed to get the information as soon as possible. After all, the wedding ceremony would be held soon, and it would be difficult to change anything afterward. A few seconds. After thinking about it, the girl typed the next message. I cannot discuss this issue with the groom because our company is organizing a surprise wedding. Young people do not know about what awaits them, what trials and contests, and therefore they must remain in complete ignorance right up to the most important day in their lives. We have already interviewed some friends, the bride and groom. We are left to clarify literally a couple of questions. I very much hope for your understanding and cooperation. You seem to be one of the groom's closest friends. Poe has spoken to you several times so that we can count on you to help us. This time we had to wait over an hour for a response, even though the guy was online. It wasn't that he didn't respond to the messages, he didn't even read them. And that was the moment Betty decided that none of this was a good idea. And what could this man have already told Sebastian? Came the reply, okay, what exactly are you interested in? The girl exhaled with relief and realized that now she would be able to get some basic information about her friend's fiancé, that she was finally not at a dead end. It was decided not to ask too personal questions, as it might have caused some suspicions. So they were the most predictable and simple. But at the same time, all the information received was very important for Betty. She found out what kind of school Sebastian attended, where he went to study after finishing 11th grade. Who were his parents, including the fact that the guy grew up without a father, as his mother gave birth to a married man who was much older than her. As a result, the guy didn't grow up in the most favorable environment. He studied not too well, and a few years ago, he moved to Moscow with some girl, and that was it. He never got in touch with his old friends again, never showed up in their little town again, only came last year for his mother's birthday, and some issues he didn't tell anyone about. Enough information had been obtained to continue the investigation. Betty planned to go to the town where Sebastian had lived before moving to Moscow to visit the school and university, maybe even visit his mother. But that was only as a last resort. So the girl planned to find out why exactly the guy had come to the town last year and what kind of issues he had been solving for a whole year. Fortunately, it was not so far from Moscow, and it was even possible to rent a hotel room in it quite successfully. Therefore, one could not worry about where to stay and how to get there. Betty decided not to waste any time and start packing right away. She texted her friend that she had to leave urgently for a few days to inspect the new sections for the construction of the coffee shop, but she would definitely be back in time for her wedding. There was no reply for a long time. And just as Betty was about to leave the apartment and head for the airport, she heard the doorbell ring. Behind her stood Adriana, who was clearly upset and even angry about something. "Hi, what's up?" Betty asked calmly, not even expecting what was about to hit her. "You don't look so good." "I'm not." Adriana asked angrily. "I'm not very good, yes. But you're a very good friend. I know all about the fact that you keep looking for information on Sebastian, that you still do not believe him and do not believe all my words." "How so?" "You just can. What's more, you're doing all this behind my back so I don't know about it, so that I think you're really happy for me and helping me from the bottom of your heart with my wedding preparations. How could you do that? I thought we were best friends, that we would be happy and help each other. And it turns out that no one needs me, that my best friend is the person I trusted next to whom I have experienced so much. She's just lying to me, trying to ruin my happy relationship with my family. What kind of friend are you after that? How can I ever trust you after that? But why? Why are you doing this to me? I love him, and he loves me. And we're gonna have the wedding I've dreamed of my whole life. Why can't you just be happy for me?" Tears rolled down the girl's cheeks. She was shivering, and it was clearly visible that she was not just upset, but furious at everything that was happening. She just stood there staring at her friend, while Betty didn't even know what to say to all of this for a few moments. A complete silence fell, which was interrupted by Adriana. "If you're really my friend, if you still love me and care about me, if you want to stay close to me, then stop doing all this. Stop trying to ruin my happiness. Don't try to make me unhappy. I don't deserve it. Just be happy for me. And stop lying to me by going behind my back. How can I consider a person my family and friends if he lies to me at every turn, if he does not value me and my feelings at all?" The girl said through her teeth. "Or do you know all this perfectly well? Or I don't even know how you and I can continue to be friends. The choice is yours alone." Adriana didn't even wait for any response from her friend. She simply turned around and swiftly walked out of the entrance, leaving Betty completely bewildered by everything that had happened. She obviously didn't expect such a situation and such a loud statement from the closest person in her life. And what to do now? What is the right thing to do in such a situation? Is it worth risking relationships and long-standing friendship for the sake of a phantom hope? Find something on Sebastian? Or should I just trust my friend and give up everything? What is the best thing to do, so that as a result not to regret the decision? Quite often in life, we have to make responsible decisions that will have a serious impact on life, not only the person who makes the decision, but also his environment. It's a pity that you can't foresee the future and know how everything will end. Betty faced a serious choice on which depends her future and the opportunity to continue communicating with her best friend. The girl thought about the whole situation for a long time, weighed all the pros and cons of each decision, and considered numerous outcomes. She had to decide as quickly as possible whether to continue the investigation or just give it all up and pay attention to herself and her personal life. Although Betty was very afraid of losing Adriana and her trust and their friendship, she wouldn't forgive herself if she put the girl in the hands of someone she wasn't sure of, who causes her certain misgivings and even fear. That's why she still decided to take a risk and go to that small town in which all of Sebastian's childhood passed. To get to the bottom of the truth, she felt that she had to do it, that a lot depends on it, and she would rather be wrong. And there would be some misunderstandings and tensions between her and Adriana, but she would be sure that her friend was marrying an honest man who would do her no harm. There was no time for reflection, and a few minutes after her conversation with her friend had taken place, Betty headed to the train station to buy a ticket. If only she had known how her determination and desire to do what was best would end. Buying a ticket wasn't too difficult. There were quite a few of them. It seemed like no one was going that way. But that was a good thing. I wouldn't have to squeeze in with numerous passengers. The road was tiring and long enough, because of the numerous traffic jams in the capital. Finally, the girl got off at the right station. I looked at the sensations. It was not a city, and God, forgotten village, which raced a certain eeriness. There was practically nobody around, no cars or people, which also put some pressure on Betty's psyche. The first thing the girl decided to do was check into an inn, so that she wouldn't have to worry about her convenient location and a place to sleep. Finding it wasn't hard, as it was located along the city's only decorated central street. The atmosphere indoors, too, was heavy and somewhat oppressive. It seemed to the girl that she was in a cheap horror movie, in which something out of the ordinary must happen. The room was clean, but dusty enough. The air felt alcoholic and heavy. Betty opened the window at once to air the room and get rid of the dust. There was no desire to stay in the hotel, but at the same time, there wasn't much choice. After all, there were simply no other places to stay for a few days in the town. Frantically exhaled the girl, put the bag on the bed, and noticed a small note that was lying on the table. On it was written at large, "Male with neuropsychiatric disorders. Be careful and vigilant." To say that it startled Betty is to say nothing. She felt a wave of unpleasant shivers run through her body, after which she was seized by a strange panic attack, which was not grounded in anything. The girl made a decision to go down to the receptionist's desk and clarify what these strange jokes were and why exactly in her room this note. "You see," replied the girl behind the front desk politely, "about a couple of years ago, a man appeared in our city, very attractive himself. He immediately impressed most of the female population. He was very pleasant and polite, and secretly very sexy for a long time. He was just going through the girls, and then he settled on one. He even proposed to her. They had a quick wedding, and then the girl disappeared. Her parents and friends never saw her again. And the very man said that she simply made the decision to divorce and left in search of herself. Of course, such a story seemed completely absurd, but the girl really filed for divorce before she disappeared. And so the man was single again. So what's so strange about this story?" Betty asked, not understanding what the man and his wife had to do with it. It happens that people split up after they get married, realizing that they're not right for each other. And I think that's perfectly normal. But I wasn't asking you about that. I was asking you about the strange note on the table beside the bed in my room. Betty asked again. "That's what I'm telling you." Just from the beginning of the story, the hotel receptionist replied. Then she went on to say that for a while, the man was feared by everyone. And then there was information that he has some disorders, from which he has several personalities. There was talk that he forced a girl to divorce him, after which he did something terrible to her, but there was no proof. Rumors from the diseases appeared after the local psychotherapist gave an announcement on television, in which he talked about the fact that in the city there is a man with some deviations in behavior, and therefore it is worth to be especially careful. Of course, all suspicions immediately fell on the visiting man. After all, the town is small. Everyone knew everything about everyone else. As a result, he became feared and even shunned. And he did behave strangely, Betty clarified. But you know, I didn't notice it. He'd been staying at our hotel for almost a year, and in all that time he never behaved strangely. The only thing I did notice were significant mood swings, which he did have quite often. I don't know if that could be considered a sign of a disorder, but on a mental or neurological level. But it was, and otherwise he was a pleasant enough person, always saying hello and giving a large number of compliments. Even offered to have coffee a few times, but I declined each time. Anyway, He was just like all the other guests. How did the story end? Is he still living in your hotel, or has he already bought something in this city? And what did they say about him in the future? Betty wanted to get as many details about this man as possible. After all, she was going to stay in town for a few days. Soon after everything had happened, the rumors had subsided, and the man was getting quite a bit of outside attention again. As a result, he found a new girl who was also quite rich. Her father had a chain of restaurants, which he bequeathed to her. This couple had been in the public eye long enough, planning a wedding ceremony, and they ended up getting married. The girl was just head over heels in love with the man, and he treated her warmly and tenderly, but not much better than all the other girls in town. The only thing that made the relationship fairly obvious was that he kissed his wife exclusively and was always by her side. Despite the fact that the girl was beautiful, many wondered how such an attractive and prominent man could choose her. After all, the character was far from sugar. Personally, I think that all this is because of money and her condition. After all, as I noticed, the man does not work anywhere. It's quite possible that the marriage was a marriage of convenience. The receptionist waved her hands, making it clear that this point in the story was not known to anyone until the end. So he could get something from her as a result. What makes you think it was all for the girl's money? Betty asked. Of course, some people do marry for convenience, but it's the first time I've ever heard of a man doing that. They usually go to any lengths to get a good reputation in the community. Well, yes, but sometime after the marriage ceremony, the man's new bride also disappeared and signed over to him the restaurant chain she got from her father. You have to admit, it's pretty weird. In addition, she left him the house and all the property, and even a power of attorney to dispose of all the assets. They say she's also filed for divorce, but I do not know this specifically, and therefore I will not mislead. The man himself told everyone that his fiancée simply moved to another city, and soon he will follow her. The girl, just like the first fiancée of this strange man, did not get in touch with anyone else, and for more than a year she has not appeared in our town. God willing, they're both doing well. But to be honest, I don't think that's likely. It's more like he was just there for the property. Although the first girl didn't have much of anything. A regular working girl who worked in a convenience store and lived with her parents. Who knows what's on the minds of people with mental illness, right? Anyway, we decided to leave a warning in all the rooms to be careful not to fall for this man's tricks. After all, we mostly have people like you staying here who don't know about this whole thing. Where is this man now? Concerned, asked the girl. After all that she had heard, she clearly did not want to meet him on the street and fall under his spell. And who knows what is on the mind of a man who really has mental disorders and does not give control over his actions. Sometime after everything happened, he really left and did not appear again for quite some time. The town is quiet and peaceful with nothing going on. But many people still remember this strange story, and therefore be careful, walking through the streets and alleys. To say that this whole conversation frightened Betty would be an understatement. She didn't really know what to do, or if she should go anywhere at all. Given that it would soon be getting dark, but Adriana's wedding was going to take place in just a couple of days, so there was no way to stay in the room. Betty decided to go to the school where Sebastian studied and try to find out something about him. She was met by a guard who recommended her to come back in the morning. You see, this is very urgent, said Betty. A close friend of mine could be harmed by one of your students. Therefore, I need to find out everything I can about him to help her. The girl begged the man for a few more minutes to help her in her search for information. And at the moment when he almost agreed, and Betty said the full name of her friend's chosen one, the man's face changed dramatically, and then he said in a gruff voice, I think you should get out of here. This guy isn't exactly welcome in our school. We don't talk about him or even remember him. I don't suppose you know anything about him, since your friend has accepted his marriage proposal. But all I can tell you is stay away from him. What you may find out about him, in time, will definitely affect your lives, and God forbid anything bad should happen. The man was about to leave when the girl called out to him. "Wait, how come? You just warned me that he is a bad man, but you don't tell me anything about him. How am I supposed to explain all of this to my friend so she realizes what a mistake she's making?" You realize that just the guard's words won't mean anything to her. "Can you give me a file, or at least tell me something about this guy's life?" Betty looked hopefully at the guard. "Sorry, no," the man answered gruffly. "I have no right to pass on information about students to third parties, except for specialized government services. This includes, I have no right to spread any information about him, and I don't want to do it, so it won't affect my life. If you have something happened, I advise you to simply contact the state authorities, for example, the police, and then you will be helped to solve the problem. Have a nice day." After saying that, the man just walked into the school premises, without saying anything concrete, saying that Sebastian was not the best person and that he was someone to stay away from gave confidence that Betty was moving in the right direction after all. And for good reason, she decided to go and still find all the information she could about the man. Before her friend could get married, the territory of the university was already closed, and therefore there was nothing left for the girl to do but to go back to study all the moments. Only the next day she returned to the room, and all night she thought about where and how to find information about who Sebastian was, why he should be feared, and how to convince the dearest man in her life. The thoughts were changing one after another, and Betty didn't even notice how she fell asleep. The girl woke up at dawn from a terrible dream that literally made her blood boil in her veins. She jumped up and took a few more minutes to come to her senses, realizing that everything she had seen was just a dream. A couple of hours later, she was standing on the doorstep of the university Sebastian had once attended. For a long time, she could not find a teacher with whom she could discuss topics of interest to her, and as a result, the girl found herself in the office of the dean, who looked at her with some displeasure. The man scrutinized Betty carefully, obviously trying to assess her intentions. After that, he asked in a rough voice, "And what made you visit our Temple of Knowledge, girl? Apparently, you are not our student. Otherwise, I would know you." "That's right. I am not a student," Betty replied, trying to choose the right words to continue the dialogue. "I just needed to get some information about my future husband so I could surprise him at our wedding. Do you have any pictures of him or report cards? So we can have different wedding contests. He refuses to give me anything on his own for some reason. He says that this page of his life is already in the past, and he doesn't want to go back to it. God, it's a circus. They didn't even come to our university to look for fiancés' photos. Shame on them. This is a temple of science and knowledge, not a circus to have 1 million photos. But I may still have my report card. Depends on when your potential husband graduated. Or maybe he didn't even exist. What is this young man's name?" asked the dean, dialing someone's number. After the name of the right person was called, the man hung up the phone and looked at the girl carefully. In his gaze, there was some distrust and even some fear and worry. For a few minutes, there was complete silence in the room. Then Betty heard that you should not marry this man. I recommend that you reconsider your decision and then have the marriage ceremony. This could be one of the biggest mistakes of your life. You have no idea who this man is, do you, or where you found him? He hasn't been in town in years. That's right. He can't come to town because he has a lot of work to do. There's a girl in the capital. He recently proposed to me, and now we're getting ready for the wedding. I decided to give him a present and find his old photos because he keeps saying they just got lost when he moved to the capital, and I had the opportunity to learn a lot about him. After all, you cannot just take and marry a complete stranger." The girl smiled, and then once again looked at the dean carefully. The man was obviously thoughtful, completely immersed in his thoughts and worries. He was obviously planning to say something, but did not dare to do it. And there were a few more minutes of silence. And then the man began to speak. "It is very good that you do not act frivolously and beforehand try to find out something about the person with whom you want to connect your life. I think that's the right thing to do. But not all the truth is exactly as we want it to be. Do you understand? The man looked at the girl carefully, trying to catch the changes in her behavior and mood. Sebastian was not our best student. He often skipped classes and was not very responsible for exams and credits. Often we had to force him to learn disciplines and even threaten him with expulsion so that he would still take up his mind. The guy was constantly organized and nervous, and it was very noticeable. But we wrote it all off to the fact that he just studied and worked a lot. Besides, he was not from the most affluent family, and therefore he just lacked basic human goods. Things were relatively good. At times he would get smart and start studying. But that wasn't always the case. Every once in a while, he'd get out of control. And at such times, we had to kick him out of class. Once we even called the police, because Sebastian and his classmates had a rather serious conflict, as a result of which the guys almost killed each other. Since then, he's been under increased scrutiny. All the rest of the time, but said Betty thoughtfully. So far, I don't see anything particularly frightening or worth paying attention to. Young boys fight often enough, and scuffles are not uncommon. So the fact that there was a fight is not surprising. And the fact that the guy was wooden, it's really quite unclear what was wrong. Maybe it was just a lack of sleep and rest. Otherwise, everything was fine. Betty almost couldn't believe what she was saying herself. Such behavior on Sebastian's part in her student days seemed strange to her. After all, now he was a gallant and calm man who didn't get into any conflicts, even verbally. Of course, people change over the years, but for some reason it seemed to the girl that the problem was not a fight, but something else, something that was not told to her. That's why after a couple more minutes of standing in complete silence, she decided to simply press the man's pity and conscience. She said, "Well, since there is no danger to me in marriage, I can build a happy future with this man. So what about a photograph or a report card? Can I at least try to find something?" The dean sat in complete silence for a few more minutes, thinking over everything that was happening, and then said in a serious and somewhat depressed voice, "No, that's not all. What should you know before agreeing to marry this man? He was supposed to study in our institution of higher learning for 4 years, but he was here only till the 3rd year. During the 2nd semester, his condition began to deteriorate rapidly. He became restless, showed constant aggression, not only towards students, but also towards teachers. We appealed to his mother to refer the boy to a doctor. That's what the woman did. Sebastian was gone for several weeks, after which he returned to teaching. He resembled a mere robot from life, who did everything he was told and showed no emotions. At the same time, it was constantly as if he was hovering, falling out of reality, not reacting to anything. What was going on around him? His mother said that he was prescribed some medication that should improve his condition. The guy became like a shadow, practically stopped eating, didn't react to anything, only, roughly speaking, went from corner to corner and only frightened everyone with his appearance. And one day he just disappeared. He stopped showing up at the university and did not contact us. We contacted his mother, and she told us that she and her son decided to put him on inpatient treatment because the medication was acting strangely. The rumor was that she just stopped giving him the pills. After that, there was a serious aggravation of the disease, and the guy was taken to a psychoneurological dispensary. He underwent compulsory treatment there and was supposed to return after its completion to complete the educational program and get a diploma. But this did not happen. As a result, I never saw him again. But the idea about this kid was not the most rosy. After the last words, the man trembled a little, which made me realize the sincerity of his emotions and feelings. So it turns out, not everything is as good as I thought, she said thoughtfully, and even with some fear in her voice. He didn't tell me that he'd been forcibly treated in such an institution, and he certainly did not warn me about any illness that might cause a seizure or uncontrollable behavior. There was a note of tension and even fear in his voice. Betty was worried not for herself, but for her friend, who was currently alone with her boyfriend, and he had a serious disorder. And that was creepy. What happened to him next? You don't know where he went or what he was doing. Maybe I just got it all mixed up, and we're talking about different people with just similar names. I mean, coincidences like that happen. Now, Sebastian is behaving just perfectly. I haven't noticed any aggression on his part or weirdness in behavior. He is like a normal person, very polite and attentive, always stays by my side and helps in everything. It can't be that in secret he turns out to be a simple serial criminal who is very skillfully hiding for such a long period of time. That's right. It would just be impossible to hide. In fact, I don't think he could be a serial offender, but you never know what to expect from a man who's been involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. You know that not every person comes out of this institution completely healthy. Some simply hide the whole essence of the problem in order to get out into the normal world. And then things start happening that no one would expect. Although perhaps your fiancé has undergone a very successful treatment, and now he is really a completely healthy person who does not have any deviations in behavior and oddities that would be worth paying attention to. In addition, our dispensary is considered one of the best, and all the doctors in it have specialized education, which allows you to get excellent results from therapy. Therefore, I advise you to just observe the behavior of the man. And in the event that everything will be normal, then it is quite possible to build a full-fledged family with him. After all, every person is worthy of getting a second chance, right? The main thing is to be careful. Is there any way I can contact Sebastian's doctor to discuss his condition and get some recommendations on how to monitor and improve his condition? I think that such information would be very useful to me, considering that I am going to be associated with this man for the rest of my life. Perhaps if the doctor had told me that the condition would be completely cured and that I would not have to worry about its recurrence, I would have been much more comfortable and would not have had to worry about the possibility that some trouble might arise at any time. Betty said this in a particularly excited manner, to give her words meaning and emphasis. Unfortunately, there is no way to contact the attending physician. The woman who had been taking care of Sebastian all along disappeared a couple years ago and never showed up again. Some say that one of the patients was involved in her disappearance. But personally, I think that she just decided to start a new life, working hard for many years to help numerous patients, while forgetting about her own happiness. She often said that one day she would definitely go away. She would definitely leave this job. And then she would be completely happy. The man spread his hands and added, in general, I suppose they won't give you any information at the hospital. They just don't have the right to do that. I think the best thing to do is to go to the boyfriend's mother. If you're really going to marry this man, you should probably get to know her. She might be able to tell you something new about him and his condition, because I can't tell you anything else about it. Betty asked a few questions about where the woman lived, where she worked, when it was best to visit her, and so on. After that, the girl said goodbye and headed to the address to find out if everything was as serious as she thought it was from all the conversations. Unfortunately, Sebastian's mother was simply not at home, neither on the first day nor on the second. On the third day, when the wedding ceremony was scheduled, Betty found Kathy at her house. She no longer hoped to meet her, but fate had decided otherwise, and now the girl faced a very difficult choice: to go to the city to help her best friend, to prepare for the wedding ceremony and be there on the big day, or to stay in town. Still getting to the bottom of it, both options had their advantages and disadvantages. Of course, one could return after the wedding ceremony was over, but there was no guarantee that nothing terrible would happen to Adriana before then. A few minutes of deliberation, and Betty stayed at the boyfriend's mother's house after all. Immediately after the girl entered, she felt some of the tension that prevailed in the place. She looked up to better understand exactly where she was and what to do in case of a critical situation. The girl sat down on the offered chair, but she refused the tea, worried that it might not be entirely safe for her health. The awkward silence began to drag on, But the first to speak was Kathy, who asked why the girl had come to her house in the first place. Where did she get the address? And who was Sebastian to her? Why was she so interested in him in their town? It became clear that the woman already knew that she was doing a little investigating and gathering various information that had a direct bearing on her son. I'm just a friend of the bride, and I was only asking around about your son to get to know him better. After all, we're going to be friends for a long time. The girl smiled, as if expressing her predisposition to such an outcome. Sebastian's mother looked at her with the same seriousness and distrust. "And that a lot of things learned?" asked the woman in an irritated voice. And then Betty realized that there was no need to try to show herself in a perfect light. One should just say straightforwardly everything she thinks and what she should find out. Over the past couple days, she had gone to quite a few places and was constantly asking about Sebastian and his life. Many didn't even know about who he was or what he was doing in the town, but there were those who knew the guy personally and had been present during all of his changes. Such people told Betty that Kathy was not the best mother and not the best person. And that's why it's worth being careful with her, so that nothing bad happens. For several days, we had to gather information literally by bits and pieces to understand all the confusing stories and hundreds of times to rethink everything we heard in order to come to the right conclusions about the man. You know, the beginning, Betty. I've learned quite a lot about your son in a few days. There's a reason they say that he who seeks will always find. So I found a lot of information about Sebastian and who he was, how he studied, how he socialized with other people, and so on. And also on the very first day of check-in, a very nice girl told me a very unpleasant story about how a couple of years ago in the city appeared a very attractive man during the relationship with which two girls disappeared. And just about the same time, Sebastian was leaving Moscow on some business of his own. When I put all the facts together, I realized that this is a man who suffers from mental illness and who married two women, both of whom have stopped contacting each other. That's your son. I honestly have no idea what exactly he did to them, but I know for a fact that it couldn't have been anything good. Sebastian was involuntarily committed to a neuropsychiatric hospital, and I'm pretty sure it was for a reason. As a result, he just left town so that everyone could forget about him. And then 2 years ago, he came back for something. To kill two girls and do something obviously wrong. Betty watched the woman's reaction carefully throughout, and after the monologue was over, the woman just laughed out loud from the bottom of her heart. She then shifted an angry yet mocking gaze to the girl. Nothing good could be read in it, and therefore Betty became very uncomfortable to be in the room. In a rather rough and commanding voice, the woman uttered, "But, and what did all that information give you? Did it make your life easier? Yes, my son is not the best person, but he didn't commit any crimes. He just loved and wanted to be loved in return. He's a model of what a real man should be. With each of his wives, he was polite and courteous, fulfilled every whim and desire before the wedding. He even gave expensive gifts. He showed me pictures of every girl he was going to marry. And your girlfriend was no exception. He sent me pictures, and I appreciated his choice. Now she will be a new toy in his collection that will complete his life and make it beautiful and memorable." To say that the woman's words startled Betty was nothing. She didn't even know what to say to what she had heard and how to react to all this. She understood only that both the son and the mother had obvious mental deviations, and all her fears and suspicions about Sebastian were not in vain. The only thought that was literally beating in the girl's head at the moment: why didn't Adriana listen to me, and what should I do now? Anxiety and fear overwhelmed Betty, but she remained seated, waiting for some kind of closure, or at least an explanation of what had happened to the girls. To understand what to expect in the future, Kathy rummaged through her locker for a long time, then threw a stack of pictures of her friend on the table in front of Betty. Each frame depicted her in a different pose, but constantly asleep. That is, there was not a single frame on which was exactly awake. The woman simply did not have. And the worst thing is that all these pictures were clearly taken by the future husband of Betty's best friend. And Adriana hardly knew about them, and about the fact that for several nights she became just an object for very strange photo shoots. And why do you need all these pictures of Adriana sleeping? Asked the girl to the woman who was looking at her with a sick smirk. How can you tell from sleeping photos what a person is like, what they are like, and how they will behave in real life? I think it would be much better if you met in person, and then you wouldn't have to hand over the photos and worry about your son's future. Besides, Adriana is a very nice and friendly girl. I think you two could get along without any problems. Betty smiled, trying to lighten the mood. If you'd like, you could come with me to the wedding ceremony today. I'm sure your son has invited you to the big day of his life. You'll get to know each other better. You'll have a great time. It's not always about working and staying home. It was like the woman poured herself into Betty's every offer. And it was even more frightening. The look was somehow sickly abnormal, and it was almost impossible to tell what would happen even in the next second. One had to just wait for some kind of response or action from the woman, while trying to smooth the situation as much as possible so as not to provoke any conflicts and strife. A few more minutes of silence, which seemed like an eternity. And then the woman decides to answer Betty, who had been sitting quietly looking around the room for all this time, already running through options in her head as to how she could escape in case of danger. She was thinking about possible means of self-defense and evaluating the possibility of calling one of the neighbors for help. Objectively, the latter option was unlikely to be effective, since the cabin was located on the very outskirts and the neighbors were quite far away. Besides, all the neighboring buildings looked completely uninhabited and only increased the feeling of anxiety. I will definitely meet my son's wife, but not today, but after the divorce, the woman suddenly said, as long as she is the official wife. And while there are so many eyes and interesting looks around them, I don't want to appear. I don't want to be seen. And then asked where the next girl who hangs on my son. I don't want any of that talk. So I'll wait for my turn for acquaintance. After these words, the woman laughed again, and from this laughter, unpleasant goosebumps ran down the girl's body. I think they are not going to divorce. Your son is very fond of my friend and says that he is going to live with her all his life. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And they will be happy in the future. And Adriana is also very fond of your son. They've already lived together and realized that they'll get along just fine. And they'll be fine. Betty tried her best to change the conversation and lighten the mood, but it wasn't working too well. After the last few sentences, she saw Kathy's angry look, which didn't bode well. The woman looked at Betty with hatred and dislike. Then she came close enough and bent down so that their faces were at about the same level and spoke loudly and aggressively. No, my son will never connect his life with some girl who doesn't understand the complexity of his nature and his fragility. They can't live together. And soon after the wedding, he will realize it again and come to me again to be a free and happy man. He has always come to me. The woman smiled ineffably, eerily. What made Betty practically shrink into a chair? Always came, and I helped him become free of all that stuff again. They were all unworthy of my son. They all behaved badly. They were all wrong for our family. I will choose a wife for my son. I will find the right one for him. And then he will be happy. He'll be happy. I'll be happy, and everybody will be happy. And all these girls, they are just empty dolls, which should be an ornament, not an object of adoration and love. They are not worthy of love. They cannot be loved. They just have to stand beautifully in the closet and please the eye, and they don't have to do everything else. Only worthy girls do the rest. The whole speech was organized in the same direction, that some girls were unworthy of her son, that they would also disappear, like his past wives, that she would help him to get rid of them, and so on. It was more like some kind of nonsense that was hard to believe, but the words sounded so convincing. and the behavior was so inadequate that the girl did not even doubt their truthfulness. She just sat and thought about how she could escape from this house as soon as possible and get to her friend to tell her everything, to keep her from making the wrong choice. For another half hour or so, Betty sat in Kathy's house, listening to the same thing, thinking about her next steps. The woman behaved completely inappropriately, pacing from side to side, laughing constantly. She had frequent mood swings and abnormal seizures, during which she simply convulsed for several seconds. From the monologue, it became clear that all of Sebastian's past wives had really disappeared, and that the man and his mother had something to do with it, that they had a peculiarity that had been passed on from mother to son, and now he also had it from time to time. Perhaps, due to the peculiarities of the body, return, and other factors, they are not as bright as Kathy, but it is definitely there, and it is a potential threat directly to Adriana. Therefore, the girl must be rescued as soon as possible. After a couple of minutes of thinking, Betty rushes to her hotel to pick up her things and go to the capital as soon as possible. She hears the same intimidating laughter through which the woman shouts, "Run, run, and you won't get far anyway. You will not have time to do anything. We'll have a beautiful new doll in the collection. I'll dress and feed her myself." Ha! The incredible surge of fear and adrenaline did its job, and the girl found herself outside the hotel. Literally, in 20 minutes she flew into the room and quickly began to collect all her things, calling a cab and trying to call Adriana. Her friend didn't answer. She saw the missed calls perfectly well, but anger and resentment took over, and so she decided to simply ignore any attempts to contact her. And that had been a serious mistake. Betty never got through to her friend. Kathy, on the other hand, had no problem getting through to her son and telling him everything that had happened in the last few days. About Betty being well aware of their family, the fact that the man had previously had wives and their disappearance, and everything else. This arrangement did not suit the man because he already had a definite plan, which was almost completed. It remained only to complete the last couple of actions, and it would be possible to replenish his unusual collection with a new exhibit, which would be just right. But everything could spoil some girl who thought she was a detective, and still managed to get to the bottom of it. He couldn't let that happen. Betty never showed up at her best friend's wedding ceremony. She didn't send any text, didn't call, and didn't even show up for the morning salute that the girls had chosen together. Adriana was deeply resentful of her, and it marred all the joy and solemnity of such an important day in her life. She did not understand how the closest person to her, the one who had remained by her side in all her troubles and misfortunes, did not appear on the happiest and most responsible day, did not stand by her side at the altar, and made no attempt to congratulate her. But had she known the sacrifices Betty had made for her, what she'd been through, and what terrible truth will be revealed soon, which will make her look at the situation from a completely different side. But now the girl has entered a new stage of her life. She became a wife, formed with her favorite man, a new cell of society in which children and a dog were already planned. Signed plans for the future, a vacation. But all these dreams were only in Adriana's head. And Sebastian had completely different plans for his life and his newfound wife, who was so happy. On the day of the wedding ceremony, not yet realizing what future was in store for her, Adriana had been trying to call Betty for a couple days, but her phone was always out of range. It didn't turn on after a day or two, and everything became clear only at the moment when Adriana received an invitation to the funeral of her best friend. It was a shock for the girl, because she was just sure that she continued to ignore her after the last conversation, and soon Betty would just calm down and get in touch. But now that she is gone, Adriana blames herself for not listening to her and not trying to find out everything, for not supporting her friend and leaving her alone with all her doubts and worries. Of course, the issue of attending the funeral was not even discussed. Adriana went to the funeral alone. Sebastian referred to the strong employment on work and stayed in the capital, giving the girl just his card so that she could pay for a cab and all the necessary expenses. The guy perfectly played the role of a man who is also experiencing grief and strongly sympathizes with the loss, who knows nothing about what happened, and certainly has nothing to do with it. Betty is killed in an automobile accident. A car came around the corner and drove into the exact side the girl was sitting on. She had no chance of surviving such a collision. Strange as it may seem, the investigation showed that no human remains were found in the second car, which simply burned up as a result of the accident. Hence, there was no one in it at the time of the fire and explosion. This circumstance seemed very strange. The burial ceremony was extremely difficult for Adriana. She simply could not believe that her close friend was gone, that she would never come to visit her again and become her child's godmother or comfort her in her time of need. It is always difficult to realize the loss, especially when it happens completely unexpectedly. The girl just did not know how to continue to enjoy every day, how to continue this life, knowing that now she will be completely alone, without the one who since childhood had always been there for her, helped, comforted, and loved her. After the funeral ceremony was over, Benjamin, Betty's father, approached Adriana. For a few minutes he stood beside her completely, silently, then took the girl's phone out of his pocket and held it out to Adriana. The girl looked at the man questioningly. "My wife and I talked and decided to give the phone to you," Benjamin said. "Maybe it has some pictures of you together, or some videos of you being happy, or some other memories you'd like to keep. I think you will have your phone safe and sound, and will be a reminder of our Betty, who loved each of us so much, who was always happy about life and every new day." A tear ran down the man's cheek. He handed the phone to Adriana and then walked towards the cafe where everyone was already gathered. Adriana spent a few more minutes over her friend's grave. She talked to her, cried, talked about the marriage ceremony and how it had ended, talked about her plans for the future. And all the while crying, how strange. Such a joyful and happy life can learn and lose all meaning from one single event that affects all future dreams and memories. How often people do not appreciate those who are close to them, do not appreciate affection and care, experiences, but exactly until they lose a person, until they are left completely alone in this world with all their problems and experiences. But could Adriana have made a difference? Perhaps. If she trusted her best friend, they just blindly followed the man she fell in love with, who appeared in her life quite suddenly and had far from the best intentions. But that was something the girl had yet to find out. And now her only thought was how to survive all this, how to cope with grief and get back to life, and how to enjoy every new day, in which her best friend would not be there. The next few days passed like a blur. There was always a huge amount of people around Adriana. Guests came often. Various acquaintances and relatives called her every now and then. They were interested in her well-being and condition. This all greatly annoyed the man, but he tried not to show negative emotions so as not to attract to himself increased attention from the outside. He just stayed by his side and tried to support his wife, so that all the hype around them calmed down, and he was finally able to move forward with his plan. But he never did, luckily for Adriana, because one night, when the girl again did not sleep after a full day of tears and worries, she suddenly remembered about the phone, which was given to her by the father of a deceased friend. Adriana decided to look at the old photos and records that were in her friend's phone, delete it from all social networks, and then disconnect the device and put it in a box where all the most valuable things for the girl lay. In fact, there were mostly various insignificant trifles and trinkets, but they were the ones that reminded her of the most important and joyful days in her life and gave her warm memories. And Betty's cell phone should have gone there too, if it weren't for the strange discovery in it. Just as Adriana was about to turn off her mobile devices, she noticed that a notification had arrived about overflowing memory and a suggestion to delete the last recorder. A new recording that was simply taking up a huge amount of space on the device. This immediately raised certain questions and misunderstandings. After all, Betty had never, ever recorded anything on a voice recorder, for as long as Adriana could remember. She had always kept everything, either in typed form, in notes, or just in her memory. All conversations she could easily recount down to the smallest detail. Therefore, there was simply no need to use such a program. And that's why it was decided to listen to the last recording, the duration of which was more than 50 minutes, and what Adriana heard made her feel terrified and start to worry about her own safety. She realized how stupid, serious mistake she had made, although it was already very late for realizing her wrong. On the tape was the whole conversation Betty had with the rector of the university where the boy studied, and then with his mother, who confessed everything that she and her son had done, who promised to get rid of Sebastian's new wife, making her his puppet. Literally, the whole conversation was recorded up to the last seconds when the woman shouted after Betty and ran away, and threatened that she wouldn't get there and wouldn't be able to tell anything. The situation was not just frightening, but out of the ordinary. The girl just couldn't believe that she was in such a mess, to get out of which it is necessary as soon as possible, so as not to say goodbye to his life. A feeling of fear and panic came over her head. The first thought was to wake up her husband and simply demand an explanation for everything that was happening. But immediately came the realization that this was a bad idea, which could cause not the best consequences. A few minutes of hesitation, and the girl was already packing her suitcase to go down to the iron. Before it was too late, she packed only the essentials and almost inaudibly slipped out of the apartment without closing the door behind her. Adriana didn't yet understand where to run or what to do in her situation. But one thing was for sure, staying with Sebastian in the same room was dangerous for her, and Betty was able to save her best friend. After so much fighting, even if it was at the cost of her own life, a few blocks in total darkness, not knowing where to run or what to do. And suddenly she sees a police station, which she runs into without a second thought, all in tears. And for a few more minutes the duty officer tries to calm her down, refuses water with sedatives, and only after that the girl's speech becomes more or less understandable to him. Adriana tells about everything that happened from the beginning, about how her relationship with the man was formed, how he showed attention and courted only her, how her friend warned her of the danger, but she wouldn't listen. The girl locks herself away and cries, but continues to tell, realizing how important it was for her and her safety, and how important it was for Betty, which now there is no way to get back. She tells the man on duty about all the suspicions her friend had about how she had asked her not to get married, and how she had gone to some small town to find out the truth, but had not returned. The story was quite long and highly emotional. At times I had to stop to calm down and drink water to catch my breath. After all, the employee simply stopped understanding what Adriana was trying to convey to him. And so, after all the information was laid out after the girl had completely emitted her soul, she reached out her phone and turned on the very recording, after which she had to run away from her own home. The man on shift duty listened to the girl carefully, despite the fact that up until the moment the recording was turned on, he was sure of the story. The man thought that Adriana was simply under some substances and did not realize what she was doing, or that she and her husband had had a simple domestic quarrel, which she was experiencing so emotionally and impulsively. But the moment the girl turned on the tape, it was no longer about prejudice and ridicule. Now the case was acquiring new colors, and it was necessary to deal with it as soon as possible, before the man could get anywhere. After finishing listening to the recording, the duty officer immediately called a senior officer and sent a patrol to the specified address, in order to apprehend the man, who was now considered potentially dangerous. The police caught Sebastian just as he was about to leave the apartment, and without explanation took him to the police station, where Adriana was waiting for him. While everyone was getting to the specified address, the girl was filling out the provided application form, in which she spelled out everything that had just happened. She had not yet finished filling out the paperwork when Sebastian was taken to the police station, and only at the moment when he saw a frightened and crying Adriana, he realized everything and stopped resisting. Judging by the fact that the girl was already filling out the application, it will definitely be accepted, and there is evidence of his guilt. And Sebastian just silently went into the cell and watched Adriana crumble his plan to pieces as she saved her own life while depriving him of freedom and all the possibilities. The man didn't even think about the fact that after he got rid of Adriana, there might still be some obstacles to overcome. So he just waited until the fuss was over and was about to realize his plan, to put it into action. How lucky the girl was that she remembered about her friend's phone in time and decided to look through all the files, including listening to the strange recording of the dictaphone. But she could have just turned off the cell phone and put it in the box. And then, in a few days, she would have become a mere memory to everyone around her. The application was accepted immediately. There was overwhelming evidence that Sebastian was guilty. All that remained was to find the girls who had disappeared earlier. Would they be found safe and sound? Or would their fate be as bad as Betty's? Kathy was apprehended in her own home. The woman resisted violently and was clearly disturbed, so sedation was necessary. She did not give any statements, did not contact law enforcement in any way. She simply remained in solitary confinement until the investigation and trial were completed. Sebastian reluctantly but still cooperated with the police, hoping to get some leniency on a future sentence. He revealed the exact whereabouts of his ex-wife and how he had managed to get all of their assets transferred to himself. It turned out that the man's mother brewed a strange concoction of herbs and paid the girls with them, after which they became obedient and left-handed. And then they turned into fretless vegetables who had no opinion of their own. They just lay in the basement, which was located under the house, and did not try to get out of there. To these same creatures, once upon a time, a woman paid for her son. And it was clear from the dean's words, which were also recorded, the girls were found in a terrible state, but fortunately alive. They were badly emaciated, in rags with horrible bruises and scars. There was a long recovery ahead, but there was hope that they could still get back to normal. And Adriana, no matter how hard she tried to forget all the horror she had been through, she just couldn't do it. She often had nightmares and a dead friend who blamed her for her own death, then laughed and cried. I'm glad that I was able to save the closest person in my life. She could no longer trust anyone with her heart and decided to live out her life alone. This is how sudden love can not only destroy many years of friendship, but also close the veil of eyes, not letting you see the whole frightening truth. And a life that resembles the most romantic, beautiful fairy tales, which is the envy of many, can one moment become a true horror story, one you wouldn't wish on your enemy.